Attorney Walter, not Disability Resolution PA here. Just wanted to go ahead and do a quick update going live specifically from a hotel in the middle of nowhere, Maine. So just expect that for obvious reasons, it's going to be a little bit tough for me to keep all the internet going while this is happening. However, and I want to make this very clear, we're going over a tough topic right now, which is essentially who has the greater rights of being first in line when it comes down to the retired, the disabled, or, for example, immigrants. And what I really did was I balanced it on twofold here, right? We have the retired and disabled, then we also have, for example, those individuals who are immigrants. So I wanted to talk about who has the first in line option to go ahead and take when it comes to basically this system. So I just want to make sure I'm going to type into the chat session real quick. Can you guys see me? And then basically from there, we're going to continue and go forward. So let's get right into it. Who has the greater rights under the US Constitution to go ahead and receive laws that benefit them, privileges, immunities, etc.? All right, so I wanted to start off and just say this. Obviously, most people's minds will go to American citizens having a greater right to essentially benefits or the things that are good in this country than an immigrant who's coming to this country. That is White House presidency and how they treat essentially those individuals that are being brought into this country based on the amount of money that they're receiving, based off of the transportation they're receiving, based on the treatment they're receiving by being fast tracked through the system, that which traditional Americans would never actually have. So I want to start out with the fundamentals. First and foremost, the Constitution, specifically when it comes to those individuals who essentially are retired or disabled. No state shall make or enforce any law which shall abridge the privileges or immunities of citizens of the United States, nor shall any state deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due process of law, nor deny to any person within its jurisdiction the equal protection of those laws. It says of the laws, but you know what I get. All right, so here's kind of the bottom line here. Let's go over the first sentence. No state shall make or enforce any law, right? So there shall be no law. You can't make it. You can't enforce it if you did make it. It's illegal. Ab initio, it's bad. You can't use it. Which shall abridge the privileges, which shall limit the privileges or immunities. So let's talk about real quick, what are the privileges and immunities when it comes to this stuff? Okay. The Privileges and Immunities Clause states under Article 4, Section 2 of the Constitution that the citizens of each state shall be entitled to all privileges and immunities of citizens in the several states. This clause protects fundamental rights of the individual citizens and restrains state enforced to discriminate against out-of-state citizens. However, the Privileges and Immunities Clause extends not to all commercial activity, but only to fundamental rights. So these are kind of your structural foundational rules when it comes to where do the privileges, the rights of being a United States citizen come from. Howdy, guys. Howdy, Robert Gillespie. Hi, Runner. Howdy. Fair Girl. Howdy. So kind of the bottom line is this. When you look at the Constitution, it creates a base framework for its citizens, right? This is the fundamental existence of what we use to define whether or not an individual is going to receive, and we all know the basic thing of what is a citizen versus not. But what do they give the citizens? Well, they give them a lot of promises. That's the crazy thing about the Constitution that they don't teach in school anymore. The Constitution is basically a book of promises that they promise to essentially those individuals that they won't take something from you unless there's this idea of due process. And what's interesting about this is that if they're starting to give immigrants better things than the actual citizens, if they're giving them more free money, if they're giving them fast passes on getting through federal adjudications as to their standing and things like that, then we have to ask ourselves is, okay, has an American citizen been deprived of their standing in the United States based on what the Constitution gives them, which are privileges and immunities? Was due process applied to those individuals? Let me give you a simple version of what due process equates to. Here we go. What is due process? Due process is a requirement that legal matters be resolved according to established rules and principles and that individuals be treated fairly. Okay? It applies to both civil, applies to both criminal law. It's kind of like your fundamental, what all the court systems are based on. So let's talk about that real quick. We're now knowing that American citizens have essentially, number one, immunities, number two, privileges, and those are protected under the umbrella of due process. And due process is something that which It protects people from having stuff stolen from them. So, like, for example, if you were a citizen and somebody tried to take your land, that would be an undue taking, right? And we have all these weird little laws, like, was it open, obvious, blah, 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 when they tried to take it? Or did the government try and take it from you when they tried to take it from you? Did they give you some sort of compensation? And then we have taking. What is not an acceptable taking? When you take something, what do you give them? I want to point something out to you guys. Every time that they let illegal immigrants into this country without the proper, review, allowing them to go ahead and go through the proper federal adjudications and the state required supplementals to go ahead and be part of that society, what happens is you actually have a taking occurring. And I don't know why people on the super right haven't been suing about this. I mean, they typically, whatever the White House wants, because that's the party that got brought in under their. Although I've been seeing a lot of Democrats that aren't happy, but the bottom line is, I'll assume for this video that the Democrats are all for as much immigration as many immigrants can come into this country. I'll assume the Republicans are super unhappy about it. They're not cool. It's not kosher. So we'll just go from that. If it's different, I totally agree with you. So here's let's go through this. Now, see, you're saying, damn stupid question. Illegals should not even be considered for our people, our citizens. Anything goes first. But see, that's the thing. Harlan, Allison, you're wrong. It's not a stupid question because nobody has asked the most basic part of this. If tons of immigrants come into this country, are the resources being illegally taken from the citizens? Violation occurred to the citizens because, and then we'll go back to the basic theory, the basic question. Did the retired come first? Did the disabled come first? Or in this case, above the classification of those individuals, did the illegal immigrants come first? So what we have are legal immigrants and legal immigrants. Legal immigrants, we put them through a test and a whole bunch of things to jump over to become citizens, and that is essentially giving the American people their version of due process, of giving them something to make sure that these individuals will be helpful to the society of America, right? To get them in, and they'll be positive, and they'll be helpful, and they'll work, and they'll pay taxes, etc. That is the form of due process for legal immigration. But consider this. Here's why, and I know you're like, it should be so simple and stupid. But it's not. It's actually not. Here's why. If you look at these illegal immigrants, and I started to look at the figures, right? The figures are essentially, it could be anywhere from $50 billion to $275 billion. Okay, now just to put that in perspective, the entire Social Security system, administering it and paying out to its recipients for SSI, costs under $60 billion per year. Entire thing. So if you essentially took, and let's take, okay, so let me get out the calculator real quick. Let's do the calculator real quick. Let's take the worst case scenario of how much it costs to deal with illegal immigrants, right? Let's take $275 billion, right? And then we go ahead and divide that by 2. And then what we end up with is essentially $137.5 billion. Okay, let's take the middle ground, just, the middle ground. $137.5 billion is more than twice what the entire SSI program would cost. So you could take every SSI person and you could give them essentially not just twice, but more than twice, significantly more than twice. You could pass the SSI Restoration Act and then almost double it. You could literally have every SSI person receiving double. That's how crazy that is. That's how immense this immigration problem actually is. Now, I am for immigration because I know mathematically from my MBA that we need immigrants to go ahead and come into this country to replace the amount of children that we're not having. We're not having enough kids to create work product, to create taxes, to allow America to become the giant war machine that it is, that protects us and also manipulates us as humans. It is what it is. I get that. But here's the funny thing about it. There's a due process violation by allowing illegal immigrants to come into this country that the citizens have, because the citizens have a higher standing. Part of those citizens are, of course, are retired and are disabled. So what's happening is people, and they think this is such an easy thing, are not looking at the base fundamental of who has a legal right to correct this measure. As I started to look at illegal immigration, I started to understand it more. I realized that legal immigration, extremely good, extremely good. And people look at legal immigrants and they go, "Oh, that type of person or that type of person." Guys, go back 200 years, go back 100 years. Whoever we were ever letting into this country has always been looked down upon, whether it was the Irish, whether it was African Americans, whether it was Islanders, whatever. Everybody that was let into this country who wasn't already in this country was looked down on. We've always done that. That is almost the American way. It's not a good thing, but it is the American way. But here's the thing. We need immigrants to go ahead and create more work product to pay for the taxes. But at the same time, we have now a new level of illegal immigration, which the American citizens are having essentially, let's just use the middle number, $137.5 billion taken from them. So consider this for a moment. Just think with me for a moment. $1 billion taken from the US government, and they can't even figure out what the numbers are, which is, why don't we have an accounting from the government? Like at some point, we got to say we have to audit what's going on there, because if we can't figure out what the numbers should be, then there's a problem. But especially when they're in the billions, when you start to look at like the biggest company in the world could be Tesla, and Tesla's worth $1 trillion, and that's the biggest of the big. When you're talking about numbers like that, where those companies consistently have to be on par with whatever the records are, provide consistent a fiduciary duty of providing proper mathematical metrics for what their taxes are, their accounting, all that stuff, the actuarial work, then I think our government should have to be able to do the same thing, right? So the problem we're running into is, do the American people, because they have a higher standing than illegal immigrants, do the American people have standing to file a lawsuit against the United States government for allowing it to? So we went over due process. Due process was basically we have to use established ways to go ahead and adjudicate, to judge a person before we remove the cool. But then we also have another problem. And that other problem is, okay, so let's say, for an example, that this individual, right, is allowed. Let's say the United States government allows 300,000 people in that aren't meant to be in this country through the illegal means, right? And then they fund them, and then they transport them, and they'll only go after them if certain things happen. In that instance, there is what's called a due process violation through a taking. It's a taking because all this money that was not purposed by the American people through their politicians has now been spent improperly on 1, law enforcement, 2, paying to illegal immigrants, 3, transporting illegal immigrants, and 4, dealing with additional adjudications in the judicial system to go ahead and deal with all of the new crimes and just whether or not they should stay here. We got a problem. It's a federal problem too. It's at the highest levels. It's a state problem too. It's at the highest levels. So what I'm seeing here is, who gets effed by this the most? Right? I mean, that's what this whole thing comes down to. Who gets really screwed over the most? Take the SSI people, you could give them all double, literally double. And essentially you have money left over. Significant amounts of money left over, in fact. Significant amounts. So the problem is, we could essentially double what we pay the SSI people. We could almost double what we pay the SSDI people. Now, the retirement people take a heck of a lot more money than that to run that program. But the point that should be paid to these individuals when it comes to bringing in good immigrants, legal immigrants who are going to work, pay taxes, all that jazz. Vis-a-vis massive, I mean, it's either between 50 billion or 275 billion. So we took the middle number, 137.5 billion. There is so much waste there that it is a due process violation of the American people, who have a standing against the federal government, who could actually sue the federal government, and the federal government would have to produce metrics, some sort of actuarial work to show how much they spend every year on illegal immigrants. This could essentially fund the disabled and almost double their benefits. Does that not bother you? Does that not bug you? And then you got to think, how many years has this been going on? And then you got to think, because we're doing immigration and allowing so many illegal immigrants in improperly, financially, when does it end? Do we stop supporting them, stop paying for them this year? Do we, make an actual wall? Do we, and a wall isn't just the answer. You're going to need, technology to see where these giant tunnels are. Because prior presidency, they found tons of tunnels that were going all into California that were miles long. Mind-boggling how they even created. They had airway things and all that kind of stuff. They had pumps, air pump. It was amazing that they had the technology in these things. I mean, you want to know who some of the greatest miners were? It wasn't people looking for gold. It wasn't people looking for diamonds. It was the people that were moving immigrants into this country illegally. And also through that, of course, drugs, illegal things as well. So the thing that I'd like to promote to you guys is then we have another tough question. Because the White House is okay with illegal immigrants coming in en masse, who has a higher standing? The American people, who the government is no longer supporting in their due process rights to not have a taking against them by the mass amount of money that's paid in taxes, or the illegal immigrants who are getting special treatment and brought into this country in usually not preferable ways. I mean, a lot of these illegal immigrants, it's terrible, but it's still occurring. And it's costing the US government a lot, billions of dollars to go ahead and try and quasi battle this entire industry, which it is. It's an industry. So then who has higher standing? And that's when it hit me. I thought this would be a really simple question. Who has a higher standing? Right? Who has the higher standing? Is it the American people or illegal immigrants? It appears that the illegal immigrants, am I wrong? No, because they keep showing over and over. They get giant checks. They get free transportation. They get free assistance. Retired, disabled. You don't get much. I wanted to point this out because I think it's important for you guys to start considering who is the government truly supporting? Who controls the government? Which it should be the American people. It should be the retired, it should be the disabled. But we both know it's not. We both know it's not. So what does this mean? How do we change it? How do we give disabled and retired people private immigrants? There's other things I'll be covering as well that talk about a waste of money. I wanted to show this to you guys. I wanted to show you why this was a tough question. L. Stanley says, yes, Americans disabled first. It's wrong to sacrifice them to take care of foreigners before and at the expense of Americans. Lori D says, I know they're not going to put Susan and I in a hotel and fly us to where we have family or friends that would help. Yeah, that's another thing, guys. Shouldn't the retired and disabled have enough money to be able to go see their family, food in some of their areas? Shouldn't they be able to have some sort of human interaction per year? So I get frustrated. I get frustrated because I think the Democrats are really on point with the idea of how we want to support people, but I don't think that they're focused on the right people. I know they're vote farming this, where they bring in immigrants and then they turn them into Democrats, down the line. Yeah, I get that. We all know that they've been doing that for years. Totally different way of doing it. So my point to you is this: I want you to understand something. Make every single American should have priority over, especially illegal immigrants, because there's $137.5 billion every year spent on just trying to battle them. Anyways, guys, you have an absolutely wonderful day. I'll catch you a little bit later. just think, wrote the question down. I was like, wow, it's simple. Then I started to think about it and I realized it's not simple. We're being manipulated. I don't think you guys should be manipulated, made this country competitive against other countries, to be dragged down by individuals to become one. And we allow the government to do this. Anyways, guys, I will catch you a little bit later. Have a wonderful day. Thank you so much. And we'll go from there. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.